Okay, I don't feel too well today. I have the chills. Hamstring injury from riding a bike so much. As Lovecraft developed his pseudo-mythology from tale to tale, incorporating such elements as an entire fictional New England topography with such cities as Arkham, Kingsport, Dunwich, and Innsmouth, a growing library of forbidden books such as the Necronomicon of the mad Arab Abdul al-Hazred, which provide glimpses of the cosmic entities and their encounters with human beings, and a cadre of sober scientific protagonists whose encounters with the unimaginably bizarre unhinged their minds. Readers and fellow writers began noticing a curious coherence in the mythic background. It was, however, only after Lovecraft's death that his self-styled disciple August Derleth gave it a name, the Cthulhu mythos. Writers such as Derleth, Frank Belknap Long, Clark Ashton Smith, and Robert E. Howard, I've heard of him, began writing tales developed upon the mythos or creating a parallel mythos of their own. Lovecraft often welcomed these takeoffs of his work, chiefly because he felt that the creation of his synthetic monsters by different writers would lend them greater credibility. Okay, I can't do this anymore. I gotta go home and get some rest. Lovecraft often welcomed these takeoffs of his work, chiefly because he felt that the citation of his synthetic monsters by different writers would lend them greater credibility. As Lovecraft's work progressed, he himself began eschewing traditional supernaturalism more and more. He had in fact never used such conventional tropes as the vampire, the ghost, or the werewolf. Very curious psychic vampire figures in The Shunned House and the Case of Charles Dexter Ward is a skillful homage to the old-time Gothic school in its use of alchemy and the quest for eternal life. But in his most characteristic work, Lovecraft devised conceptions and entities entirely his own. By 1931, when he wrote the landmark Antarctic novel At the Mountains of Madness, he was ready to articulate his new aesthetic creed. The time has come when the normal revolt against time, space, and matter must assume a form not overtly incompatible with what is known of reality, when it must be gratified by images forming supplements rather than contradictions of the visible and mensurable universe. And what, if not a form of non-supernatural cosmic art, is to pacify this sense of revolt, as well as gratify the cognate sense of curiosity. At the Mountains of Madness, in which it is made plain that the entities that human beings like Al-Hazred took to be gods are nothing more than aliens from outer space, embodies these new conceptions perfectly, and in many ways remains his greatest work of fiction. And yet Lovecraft could still write so powerful a tale as The Shadow over Innsmouth, which is largely lacking in the overt cosmicism of the Antarctic novel, instead painting an unforgettable picture of the decay of an aging New England backwater invaded by hybrid entities from the sea. The last several years of Lovecraft's career were, however, not entirely happy. In 1931, he was stunned by Farnsworth Wright's rejection of At the Mountains of Madness, which he later admitted did more than anything else to end my effective fictional career. Several of the tales he produced during this period, such as The Dreams in the Witch House and The Thing on the Doorstep, are not complete successes, but that can hardly be said for his next to last fictional work, The Shadow Out of Time, a tremendous excursion in cosmicism, ranking second only to At the Mountains of Madness. It is fitting that these two works appeared in the science fiction magazine Astounding Stories. Lovecraft, plagued by ill health in his final years, had apparently contracted cancer of the intestine as early as 1934, but never had it treated, and by increasing doubts as to the merits and endurance of his work, died in poverty on March 15, 1937. His unworldliness in dealing with magazine and book publishers, and his gentlemanly stance as an amateur writer who wrote for the love of writing, resulted in his failure to sell a collection of his tales to a major publisher. Only a few months before his death, he had the dubious pleasure of seeing a typographically nightmarish and crudely bound semi-professional edition of The Shadow over Innsmouth appear. But by this time he had attracted a legion of friends and colleagues, chiefly through the medium of correspondence. Two young writers, August Derleth, who had never met Lovecraft in the 11 years in which they were in touch, and Donald Wandry, who had met Lovecraft only a few times in Providence and New York, were so devoted to preserving Lovecraft's work in hardcover that they founded the firm of Arkham House to rescue his tales from the oblivion of the pulp magazines. Their edition of The Outsider and Others, 1939, is a landmark, but in subsequent decades, more capable hands have prepared texts that eliminate the typographical and textual errors of previous editions and provided commentary to elucidate the literary, historical, mythological, and scientific elements that make his work so endlessly compelling and interpretable.